Welcome to Ohio VolleyTalk. Alongside me here, Austin, I'm Elliot Scully. Joining us today, the head coach of the St. Vincent St. Mary Fighting Irish, Logan Jennings. How you doing, Coach?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, happy to have you on. So last season in the regional finals, you took down the 1 seed Brecksville Broadview Heights, and as a 2 seed, which is very impressive in D2, especially because the upsets mean a lot more because there aren't as many teams. Unfortunately, that was one of the only matches that they didn't end up putting on ESP Media, so I didn't get to watch it. But what did that mean for the team to have such a great upset like that?
Oh man, everything. So that group, my seniors last year. So I started with the program their freshman year. So we went defeated when they were freshmen. And when I mean defeated, I mean we didn't win a set. So like not a match, didn't win a set. So for that group, from my starters to my non-starters, to get from where we were at that first season to that, it was everything.
Yeah, it's quite a big turnaround overall. Ended up going to the state semifinals last year where you ended up losing to Carroll. You come back this year, and in our polls, you've been close to number two throughout the entire season. Can you speak to the work and the progress that you guys have done since that loss last year?
Yeah. The guys on varsity are, man, they've been zoned in since probably that loss. And that's something that we kind of try to preach about is how all of this stuff matters. All of it's connected, right? The seniors didn't have the luxury of kind of having that chip on their shoulder, as that's done. But the juniors and the sophomores, even freshmen that I had that were playing, and I took that moment and said, okay, so we made it here, right? And now can we get over the finish line?
So looking ahead to this season, you went to the Mount Vernon quad. Your first first three matches of the season, you played Moeller, Mount Vernon, and St. Charles. You also went to the DeSales try, played DeSales and Fenwick. What's the importance of having that D1 and out of region competition?
Just seeing different looks, right? I think up here in the north, we know a lot of the players, right? Especially I'm pretty involved in the club scene up here. So just seeing potential opponents down the road, seeing different styles, right? Getting to play against Moeller, who's just like this big physical team, and seeing how those styles work. And, the other part for me, it's really fun to interact with these coaches. Just, candidly asking, hey, what do you think about this? And just seeing what their philosophy is. So it's huge. And it's a great experience for the kids.
Absolutely. When you look at how you guys have done this season, you only have one D2 loss, and that was in the DeSales Tribe to DeSales. Of course, we had Andy Feltz on last week. He talked about the try and his thoughts. What were your thoughts? And more specifically, what were some takeaways from that loss to DeSales that weekend?
Oh man, they were better, right? They were better that weekend. That's a big team, some big kids down there. So that's something that my team had to recognize. Seeing the block, hitting away from it, understanding all of that is paramount. So there's a lesson in all of that. And we would love to see them down the road. But yeah, that team was just better than us that day. The setters does a wonderful job. They've got excellent pins. So yeah, just hats off to them.
Any adjustments you'd make if you see them again?
Well, I know Andy's probably going to watch this.
Okay.
So I would compliment him on his haircut, and I would ask to play in a gym with a higher ceiling.
All right. There we go. Hopefully a neutral site will take care of that. So when the regional alignments came out, did you have any surprises or any strategies come up with that?
I have some empathy here with the state. D2 is just kind of this bizarre land right now, right? So we had in our region, Brecksville and Walsh both moved up, right? So they go from D2 to D1 and Brecksville's a really strong team. Walsh is kind of middle of the pack, but would have been a really, I think, comparable good D2 team. So the regions up here in the north, I think, just got a little bit funky. And I don't think that that's a symptom of anything specific. I think the state is just trying to build this thing for the future to make the most sense and have everything balanced. But for mine, no huge surprises there. We kind of knew that we've got a, potential destiny with Hoban at some point, which looms large with the rivalry and everything at the school too.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I think all regions probably saw that. Central teams had the Olantangis move up, and LaSalle moved up in the South region. So yeah, it's definitely not something specific to the North. Now, when you're looking at potential bracket matchups, what does that conversation look like with your coaching staff?
I you think about all this stuff so much, right? As a coach, you go through all of these different scenarios and you say, okay, well, what if we match up with DeSales first round? Or what if it's Fenwick? Or, ooh, I've been watching a lot of Baden. That team does some interesting things. But the reality is however it folds, you're going to have to beat somebody. That's it. Whether it's the semifinals or the quarters or the state finals. Like, if you want to be the best, you have to show up and you have to compete.
For sure. Now, when you look at the North in general, much like a bunch of other teams, you guys are not a part of a league. Do you see that kind of benefiting you when it comes to making the schedule, or would you like to be a part of a league at some point?
So I think the North is at a really fun point right now. So I think that the Central and the South have had a lot of concentrated talent over the years, right? We'd have a few teams pop up here and there that'd be really good, but I think with the influx of with a bunch of these kids playing club, and really starting to dive into it, and the growth that we've seen up in this region, I think a league would be great. But I think that across the state, we're just going to start seeing just a higher quality of play. So a league with us, I think would be fun if it was like, even if it was blended D1 and D2, I think that would be a blast to play some other private schools. Yeah, I think it would help build consistency.
Yeah, I know Coach Dom from Ignatius was talking about, like, even though he's not in the league, he still plays the same teams every year, and sometimes we'll play them like you would in the league, like one home and one away. So, but just to have the ability to win something like a league championship and be able to follow league standings is definitely something that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So looking ahead, you've got probably a preview against potential regional final matchup in Archbishop Hoban, and then you got St. Ignatius next Tuesday. Outside of that, not a super eventful week. What kind of statement is this team looking to make this coming week?
So we took a tough one Friday against Brecksville. So we lost 3-0 to Brecksville. And I mean, Brecksville is a scary team. That team is really good at ball control. And when they decide to play to their level, that's a fun team to play against. But we needed that loss. We needed to build on that. We needed to be exposed to things aren't always going to go our way. So I think from here on out, is really starting to fine tune the things that we're deficient at. And I said this to this group all the time. It's like, what a luxury, right? That we have to worry about these small problems compared to other programs, right? And that this is such a wonderful moment that these guys need to capitalize.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, really excited to see how St. Mary does. You guys have a great chance to come out of the North region, and hopefully we'll see you at States.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
See ya.
That was Logan Jennings. Thanks again to him for coming on. A little bit of a quicker interview, but definitely worth it because we got a lot of stuff to get into here today. So first, this past Friday, Moeller reverse swept Elder. Elder recently got Bradley Lanter back, and they look significantly better with him, to their credit, but Moeller able to pull off that reverse sweep. And there were some big Saturday matches that went on. The GCL challenge occurred, which I actually didn't really know was a thing, but it was mostly the D2 schools, and then I think LaSalle won as well. DeSales, without Hoying, without their setter, they defeated McNicholas, Carroll, and Alter. They went 3-0. That was pretty impressive. Roger Bacon also won against Carroll and also went 3-0 because I don't think it wasn't a regular quad. They didn't all play each other. There was just a bunch of teams that went and all played 3 matches. And then LaSalle lost to Carroll. That is their first loss outside of the GCL South. But outside of that, that's pretty much the highlights of the GCL Challenge. Any thoughts on those matches?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting. And you talked about DeSales and Cam Hoyne. He was also not playing in their match against Dublin Jerome on Wednesday. It's just interesting to see like how this team, especially without him on the court, really starts to show themselves in some big moments. I think after the loss, especially to St. Charles, this was a week where DeSales needed to get their confidence back after being number 1 in our rankings throughout the entire year. And head coach Andy Feltz even talked about it with us last week. And I think definitely taking those results, that's something to watch with DeSales going forward.
Yeah, I mean, after they got beaten as badly as they did by St. Charles, who's kind of, in the lower end of the top 10, I assumed that Carroll wouldn't have any issues with him, or maybe they would even lose to McNicholas or Alter. But I was really, surprised that they went 3-0. And I think that really speaks to how complete of a team they are, even without their starting setter. The Jackson try also happened. Jackson and Moeller went to Beaver Creek, all played each other. All teams went 5. And it's one of those things where it really shouldn't happen. Jackson beat Moeller, lost to Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek beat Jackson, lost to Moeller. So like they all went 1-1, which usually doesn't happen in a tri match. But that Moeller loss was pretty huge. I mean, Jackson is definitely not. There's no slum of a team, but they are an 8-loss team. So for Moeller to, I don't know, to take a loss like that and also go 5 with Beaver Creek, it's not the best, I think, since they, obviously they're missing their outside hitter Haggerty. They lost him in the semifinals of the Elite Eight against Liberty. Since that happened, they lost the match to Liberty in 4. They went 5 with Darby, went 5 with Sycamore, got swept by St. X, went 5 with Elder, went 5 with Beaver Creek, and lost in 5 to Jackson. So you start getting into the numbers, this team is not that many points away from having a heck of a lot more losses on their record.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. And I think especially when we look at seeding for each region, I especially look at those 2 5-set games at Brisbane where they beat Elder in 5 off the reverse sweep, and then they beat Sycamore in 5 as well. Both of which earlier on, Moeller did not look 100%. And then as the game goes on, they start to get their wheels back and they start progressing in ways. But I think you make a good point there, especially after what we've seen from the Crusaders. Not at 100% by any stretch. You didn't mention this, but they also dropped a set to LaSalle earlier this week. So in sense, we're starting to see Moeller get a little shaky. And I think that's one team that may not be a concern going into next week, but especially once we get to playoffs and once we get to regionals, this team will really have to start asking questions on how far can they go to defend the state title.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look at it later, but the South or Region 4, I should say, is a loaded region. There's not going to be much time off. So I hope that Haggerty gets back and they can get back to full strength quickly. One interesting thing is I noticed they keep trying out different lineups with putting people different places. They tried Patterson on the outside and moving back to middle, try one of their middles at outside, try an outside at the right, moving a lot of people around. It's not something that you typically see. I think coaches tend to have one starting lineup, and if a player goes down, they just make a new lineup and run with that. Clearly trying to adjust. Probably not the best time of the season to be having your shakiest moments. I think usually you want to have your best volleyball going into the playoffs. But as we saw last year from them, 18-6 and still won a state championship. So, the Moeller team, obviously, they turn it on for the postseason. So we'll see if Lee Meyer can turn that around. But they've got a heck of a region to get through. Kilbourne swept Thomas Worthington, so Kilbourne will probably see as the 4 seed in Region 3. McNick upset Baden in 4. That'll definitely shake up the seedings. Now, if you look at McNicholas's record, there's one match missing on Max Preps. I'm pretty sure they beat Oak Hills, so I think they're 11-10. They could be 10-11 though, but all of their losses are either in D1 or they're in teams that we've had in the top 6. So they're really not a bad D2 team at all. But, just having that McNicholas over Baden, I think that's pretty significant for D2 because Baden historically, last year they were unbelievably good in D2. We kind of thought that would transfer to this year, and it's not necessarily been the case.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I think the one thing, and we'll talk about this when we get to the rankings, I still put McNick below Baden just because the Rams have done so much better against better competition, both in D2 and D1. But I think for McNick, more importantly for me, it gives me hope and it gives Rockets fans hope that this team can make a run. We've been talking about it throughout this entire season. Who is it? Roger Bacon, Baden, Carroll, and then Fenwick, those 4 teams. But there's a good chance one of those 4 is facing off against McNick in a district final. And that's definitely going to be electric, especially for something that is a district final. So for me, I definitely see that McNick does have a shot to potentially make a run, and that team has a lot of confidence going forward.
I think technically it's a regional quarterfinal this year, but yes.
Got it.
Sycamore swept Oak Hills to win the GMC again, so that's a three-peat from them. Congratulations. Walnut Hills swept Loveland to win the ECC, so that's a four-peat. They won in 2019, 2021, 2022, and 2023. Obviously, couldn't win it in 2020. Congratulations to them. Pickerington North actually swept New Albany, which is something I did not see coming. Pick North had one loss to Gahanna Lincoln, which is in their conference, in 5. Besides that, they beat New Albany twice to have a 13-1 record. So they won the OCC Ohio outright. I was expecting, honestly, New Albany to go 14-0 and just dominate like Pick Central did last year, but Pick North able to pull that out. So congratulations to them. Jerome swept Kilbourne, have a record of 12-2 in the conference, so they win a share of the OCC Cardinal. Darby swept Berlin and Thomas, and since we last talked to you, so they also have 12-2 record. They have a share of the OCC Cardinal as well. And Berlin lost to Darby, but they're still in it. They have a 10-2 record right now. So a win against Thomas, who's 5-8 in conference play, and Big Walnut, who's 0-12. That would grant them a share of the OCC Cardinal as well and give us a 3-way tie, which, if that were to happen, that would be in the past 3 years, 5 unique winners of the OCC Cardinal, which is pretty cool, I think. Beaver Creek right now is in the lead for the GWalk with a record of 5-0. They haven't clinched anything yet, but definitely the favorite to win that from where I'm standing here. Liberty this past week had a perfect 14-0 record to win the OCC Central. Not a whole lot of competition there, obviously, but still an impressive feat to go 14-0 in any league. And outside of St. X winning the GCL South, I don't think that there are any other leagues out there. It's definitely possible that I'm wrong. So if you're watching this, please shoot me an email or DM me or something if you're in a league or you want it and we haven't talked about it. But those are the only ones I know of just from looking at teams on social media, because there isn't really kind of a database out there like on Max Preps for all the conferences. So a little bit surprising. Ignatius is healthy, but Jackson and St. Ed's both had 5-set victories over St. Ignatius. So they went from being, the 2 seed below Hudson, now they're the 3 seed. Now they're probably looking at a 4 seed. And then Jackson swept St. Ed's recently. So Jackson will probably be the 2 seed. St. Ed's will be the 3 seed. Just really impressive wins by them. Not something that I was expecting. Obviously, it's close with 5 sets, but just unfortunate timing, as that'll kind of kill you. And Ignatius goes from looking at a 2 seed and now probably looking at a 4 seed.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've seen, especially with all the matchups in that region, it just seems like the one team that's been surprising. I know we talked about this at the beginning of the season, one team that can just surprise us. And I think Jackson has surprised us in the course of a week, and not just for reverse sweeping Moeller, but also beating St. Ignatius, also beating St. Ed's. And they've automatically put themselves in a position to be the 2nd seed overall. And that puts them in a much easier battle if they are in the 2nd seed, or even if they don't get 2nd, they do have a good shot at getting 3rd. Either way, they avoid Hudson in a potential regional semifinal matchup if it were to happen.
So we're looking ahead at our undefeated teams so far. St. X is 17-0. They need to win at Elder, at Walnut Hills, and home versus Sycamore. Presumably, I would say home versus DeSales, the way Coach Phelps was talking last week, but we don't know that for sure. That's not on the Max Preps yet. They actually did have a match scheduled at Bishop Fenwick for this past week, and then the date came and went, and they didn't play it, and it got the lead from Max Preps. So I'm not totally sure what happened there. I know you have more connections probably with St. X than I do, but you're not sure either. So
yeah, I don't know.
It's a ghost match. I don't know what happened there, but as it stands right now, with the matches they have officially scheduled, St. X has a ceiling of 20-0. Hudson, same thing. They're 18-0 right now. They go at Jackson and at St. Ed's. So if they win both of those, they're 20-0, perfect regular season. Now it's actually pretty interesting because they're looking at a 1 seed in Region 2 right now. St. Ed's at the 3 seed, Jackson at the 2 seed. So both those teams have a chance to make an upset, or maybe give Hudson a good fight. Now, Hudson's only dropped 2 sets on the season so far. Again, probably with not as good a competition as St. X, but still, really big 2 matchups to close it out. And then there's one more event I'd like to preview. It's called the Battle of Dublin. So Dublin Jerome, Dublin Scioto, and Dublin Kaufman will all go to one of the schools and play best of 3. And then the winner of it gets a trophy. So that's pretty cool. Just thought I'd highlight that. Yeah, it's a cool event. anything you can win a trophy in is a good time. Another event we'd like to preview that is coming up this Monday. That's just a really awesome event, something I got to play in as a senior. The OCC Challenge. 22 OCC teams will go and travel to Hilliard Derby to all play a match, which is just awesome. They play best of 3, and one of the only times I've seen it happen, the third set's to 15. Obviously, that's standard in club. That you don't usually see that in high school. But it's one of the only times I think that I'm okay, or I would be okay with going 3 sets if I were a coach. Because usually my attitude is like, like you have somewhere to be, like we should just play real volleyball. But this one, they're doing it all in one night. So I think it makes a lot of sense. If they did 5 sets, it'd probably go till like midnight or 1 a.m., which nobody would want. But the really cool thing they do is, most leagues have league awards that they give out. They'll announce all the league awards before the showcase match, which is on the home court at 8 p.m. So this year it's between Kilbourne and New Albany. Something that really shocked me, actually, because it really should be Derby and Liberty. But for some reason, they put them at the second slot. Now, I don't know. Maybe that's just Derby's coaches not wanting to be biased towards themselves. But Derby Liberty really is the best match. They're both state-ranked teams that we have. So I don't know why they're not at the 8 o'clock slot on the main court. Yeah, it's just cool because for the showcase match, usually all the teams will stay and watch that one. So that was cool. It was fun. I'd like to get into our seeding predictions for Division 1. Now, looking at Region 1, give me a quick list. Just the seedings that you think have a chance to come out of the region. Who do you got?
Yeah, I think for me, Region 1 is interesting unto itself. You were talking about the OCC earlier, and that conference in ways is being split up amongst many teams in the central part of Ohio. But when I look over at Region 1, I think Mount Vernon really catches my eye overall. I mean, they've been a prominent team. They've always been in our top 10 and in cases top 5 throughout this entire season. They look pretty prominent. Olentangy Berlin, although they looked a little bit flat, but I think some of it just goes back to how sharp Derby has become over the past couple of weeks. They could also be a viable candidate to represent Region 1 at the state tournament. For me, I think it's them, but I think Olentangy Liberty for sure. We talked about it at the beginning of the year, and once again, it feels like Liberty's the favorite, I think, in Region 1 to get out of that. But nonetheless, it should be a good regional semifinal if it happens between Mount Vernon and Olentangy Berlin. We saw those face off earlier this year. Mount Vernon, I believe, won that game in 5. But I think Liberty right now is still the favorite to win.
Yeah, so I should preface this. Based on the email where we got this, all the matches that are played until 4/27, which was Thursday night when we're recording this, will be counted towards the seedings. So theoretically, no matches played in the regular season after this will count towards seeding at all. So if you're making mock seedings alongside us, this is the last day that you should be looking at the matchups. So anything past this really is just for practice for the playoffs. I would say for me, I think I would agree with what you said. I got Liberty at 1, Mount Vernon at 2, Berlin at 3, probably Pick North at 4, and maybe New Albany at 5. Those are probably the only teams that probably have a realistic shot at coming out of the region. I think you're looking at Liberty, Mount Vernon, and Berlin, though, as teams that have a legitimate shot to come out of there. What about Region 2?
Region 2, we talked about this earlier. Hudson, for right now, should be the number 1 seed and probably will be the number 1 seed. The second seed, again, I have to credit Jackson. The way they were able to burst on the scene, both in state and in the region, really showed this past week. And I think they'll be awarded with the second seed. It's a quick turnaround. Again, Jackson's kind of been a little bit in the back seat when it comes to the region, but they've been able to get that victories. I think they go second. Now, third and fourth should be interesting down the stretch, but I do have to give third to St. Ed's. We were talking about it earlier. Granted, they did get swept by Jackson earlier this week, but they were able to get the victory over St. Ignatius. So I think they get 3. St. Ignatius, for right now, I would probably put them at number 4. They've been doing a consistent job throughout the season, and even outside of the North region, as we're calling it right now, they've also had some pretty decent competition down the stretch. Not what they want ideally, especially after being one of the top seeds last year, but I think they'll end up being number 4.
Yeah, really interested to see how that plays out when selecting where teams want to go. to see if they'll avoid Hudson, if they'll all three go in a different bracket, kind of like we saw with Elder last year, where, Walnut Hills, St. X, and Moeller all chose the bracket opposite Elders because they didn't want to play them in a regional final. I would agree with you. I think Hudson at 1, Jackson at 2, St. Ed's at 3, Ignatius at 4. I guess so that really kind of takes away a little bit of the value from the Hudson-Jackson, Hudson-St. Ed's matches coming up because they can't be used for seeding. A little less stakes, but still a good preview. About Region 3.
Region 3 for me. Now, if you were to ask me this maybe a couple of weeks ago or 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would say Beaver Creek without a doubt. I mean, we were talking about how they quote kind of dodged a bullet by not being in Region 4. That's pretty stacked. But I would have to give it to Darby. Again, it is interesting. Beaver Creek did beat Darby earlier this year in 4. But I think the way that the Panthers have been playing this year, especially the way they've improved, I think ever since that Centerville tournament where they took St. X to 5 and they lost in the semifinals. But ever since then, it feels like they've just been on an uptick overall. It almost feels like, especially when you look statewide, it feels like Darby can beat any of those teams in the top 10, or at the very least get very competitive with them. I would put them at number 1. You may disagree with me. And then looking down, I would just say based off the rankings overall, again, for right now, they're towards the top of the OCC, sharing a group of the title. I would have to put Dublin Jerome at 2. Beaver Creek, in my opinion, drops down to 3 just because of the types of games they've been playing recently. It feels like they're kind of backing away going into this tournament. Again, knowing how they played during this entire season and knowing they have the head-to-head victory over Darby, I could see them higher, but in my opinion, I put them in number 3. And we were talking about this earlier. I think Worthington Kilbourne, they've been a little bit of a surprise getting some victories in the OCC Cardinal. I think they get number 4 in that region.
Yeah, I think I would say for me, I believe that Darby is the better team, but I think resume-wise, Beaver Creek has the argument. If we're college football playoff committee and we're making national championship rosters here, I think that Beaver Creek will get the 1 seed. I think Darby will get the 2, Jerome at 3, Kilbourne at 4. Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think that the Darby loss to Beaver Creek was a fluke, personally, just based on the way Beaver Creek's been playing and the way Darby's been playing. It really seems like Darby's coming into their own and really gelling at the right time. But I think resume-wise, Beaver Creek, and probably name recognition-wise too, Beaver Creek historically has been a great team, and they still had a great season this year regardless. So I think they will get the 1 seed. The interesting thing, though, is I know Kilbourne's coach, I got some inside information. She likes playing Jerome better than Darby, she said. So if we assume my seedings happen and it's Beaver Creek and Darby goes the other bracket, and then Jerome goes after Beaver Creek, we could see Kilbourne also go in that bracket and maybe leave a spot for a 5 seed like Thomas Worthington, like Upper Arlington, to get in and play Darby in a regional semifinal. All right, I'll look ahead to Region 4.
Without a doubt, St. X would be the number 1 seed. They've just been commanding throughout the year. They've got the GCL title. Without a doubt, they're at the top. Moeller, and I talked about this earlier, those 2 wins in 5 against Elder and Sycamore really helped them out in terms of confidence, but I think it also helps them out in terms of seeding. They've got head-to-head victories over both of those 2 teams. I think the Crusaders take second. Going down, and I think this is where I talked about how Walnut Hills was able to get a higher seed than St. X last year. I think Sycamore does it this year. They've got the head-to-head victory over Elder, and more importantly, they've been a commanding team so far this year. I mean, they lost to McNick earlier this year, and then they lost to Moeller. And other than that, not too many losses on their resume. They've been an overall good squad, and they've showed it there, backing it up with another GMC championship. Give me the Aves to be the 3rd seed, and then Elder. I think this Elder team, after struggling a little bit throughout the season, especially earlier on, they've started to come into themselves as well, especially how they played earlier on against Moeller, commanding victories in the 1st and 2nd set, and then also backed it up with a great performance against Lakota West on Wednesday, beating them in 3. Give me the Panthers to be the 4th seed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting region. I think obviously St. X at 1, Moeller at 2. I think they've earned that spot. I agree with you. Sycamore at 3 and then Elder at 4. Now looking past that, it's kind of a toss-up. I think we could see maybe Lakota East sneak in at 5. They've had really a great season. I think only 2 losses so far. But also LaSalle could hold that 5 spot. And then you also have Walnut Hills has been solid this year. Loveland even's been a good team. It's just tough. There's a lot of competition. And you look at 18 teams, that means everyone's going to play at least 4 playoff games. So, you're not going to see, last year, maybe even the regional final wasn't super competitive for the 1 seed. This year, that's not going to be the case. You might even have competitive regional quarterfinal games where, it's not a guaranteed win or a very probable win. So yeah, I'm really interested to see, though, not necessarily what the numbers come out to, but how many teams avoid St. X, right? Because, like Muller's obviously going to go in the other bracket. Sycamore, I imagine, will go in the other bracket. Elder maybe even will go in the other bracket. Past that, it becomes a risk reward thing of like, we might avoid the best team in the region, but what about we want to get to a regional semifinal? Like that becomes a thing where teams maybe want to take the easier path to the regional semifinal rather than wanting the easier path to regional final. So interesting, just philosophies. Looking at D2 here, what are your thoughts on Region 5 seeding?
Yeah, Region 5, I think pretty simple. St. Francis de Sales is 1, St. Charles is 2. I'll be honest with you, I don't pay much attention to the other teams, and I say that with respect, but it feels like it's just those 2 teams, and we could see an interesting battle on our hands to decide who goes to the state tournament in that region.
Yeah, exactly like you said. And honestly, the reason you don't pay much attention to them is probably because they're not really in the conversation for winning a regional championship. So it's tough to pay attention to everyone. And, the more you win, the easier it is to look at you strategically. How about D2 Region 6?
D2 Region 6, I think it's between Hoban and St. Vincent St. Mary. Again, we've been high on the Irish throughout this entire year. I put them at number 1 last week. I still have them at number 1 this week. And Hoban, too, has been really strong as well. They've got an interesting matchup tomorrow. Again, like you said, won't decide seeding, but it would definitely decide who has a little bit of the advantage going into that game, rather a potential regional final, because it feels like it is those 2 teams that are matching up and should be matching up for that regional final. I think just based off record, St. Vincent St. Mary's will be the 1 seed and Hoban will be the 2 seed.
Yeah, we'll get a peek into their matchup tomorrow, actually, when this is uploaded Friday. They'll face off, and that'll maybe be a preview of the regional final. But again, won't be able to be used for seeding. So, I mean, again, not in actuality. Now, maybe coaches let it affect their mindset a little bit, but theoretically, it doesn't matter for seeding at all. Now, how about Region 7? That's a bit of a tough one.
Yeah, I would probably say Villa Angela St. Joseph, just because they've looked pretty strong overall in terms of competitions. And I know Max Preps has put them pretty high, especially for teams from the Region 7. There's a lot of teams that are relatively new, like Notre Dame, Cathedral Latin, Chardon are also on there, just started their programs earlier this year. But in my opinion, if there's any team that could be facing VASJ, or rather could contest VASJ for the final, maybe Bard Early College, just based off their record. I don't think they've had that competitive of a schedule, but Max Preps has them, I believe, of only 1 loss on the year. So they could be a favorite to win that division, or rather that region.
Yeah, and again, that's tough to focus on because basically whoever they face in the state semifinal, I would be shocked if they come away with a win, anyone from that region. But still will be interesting. I think I would agree. I think I would even maybe put Bard Early College at the 1 seed because of the record. It's tough to only be 1 loss, but Villa Angela St. Joseph will definitely give them a tough test. But really, honestly, it's kind of a toss-up. I think anyone could come out of there, and I wouldn't be super surprised. How about Region 8?
Yeah, Region 8 is going to be something else for sure.
Yeah.
But I think just based off head-to-head victories, and again, it's very nuanced between these teams, but I think Fenwick takes the number 1 seed. Carroll, it is interesting down the stretch, but I just think they take 2, and Baden is going to take 3. I think the Rams took a little hit with that McNick loss, and I think it will show there in the rankings. Roger Bacon may get number 4. Again, you may disagree with me because or rather, Roger Bacon does have the head-to-head victory over Baden. So we could see a swap between those two. But I think McNick takes the 5. And I think whoever gets that 4 seed against McNick, especially if it is a rematch between the Rockets and the Rams, that would be a very interesting regional quarterfinal on our hands.
Yeah, I think I'd do it a little differently than you, honestly. This is probably the one where we have the most room for disagreement. I think Fenwick at 1 makes sense, Carroll at 2. Then here's the thing. McNicholas, right? They've beaten Baden not just once, but they've beaten them twice. And they've only had the loss outside of that have all been teams that we've ranked above them in D2 and other D1 teams. So I would say I think Fenwick at 1, Carroll at 2. I think I could see any combination of Roger Bacon, Baden, and McNicholas happening. But I think that McNicholas should probably be at the 3 or the 4 spot, and opposite them should be Roger Bacon. And then I think Baden should be the 5, personally, because they've lost to Roger Bacon and they've lost to McNicholas. And, they're not really having a particularly great season. They're still a 9-loss team. I don't think they deserve to crack the top 4, if I'm being honest. Take a look here at our D1 state rankings. Pretty much identical in the top 7. Sanex obviously staying undefeated. Hudson's undefeated as well. You got them up to number 2. Liberty's still looking good. I'd be really interested to see how they play against Darby. That'll be a big one. Archbishop Moeller at 4. Despite how shaky they've looked, I think we can give them a little bit of a pass because they're missing the starting outside. But we'll see if that continues into the playoffs. Darby at 5. I just think they're really starting to come to their own. Mount Vernon at 6. Sycamore at 7. Any commentary on that top 7?
Yeah, I think it's pretty consistent throughout. Again, the biggest question, at least for me, was do I put Darby back in the top 5? And the answer for me was yes. Not just because of that head-to-head victory over Mount Vernon, although that was in the first week of the year. But I would
Mount
definitely
Vernon was
say
missing their setter at the time.
that too, exactly. But I think the other question with Darby was, can they play confident? And they definitely look confident against Berlin. I was watching that game, 3-set victory for them, and they've really shown that they can become a contender. Let's see how they do against Liberty, because that's going to be a real test for them. Looking down the top 10, I think it remains the same. Darby better than Mount Vernon and Sycamore for now. I still put Berlin. They've had a pretty strong contest throughout the year and pretty good competition. I just put them above Jerome and then even Beaver Creek as well. I was considering taking Beaver Creek out. And again, there's a lot of honorable mentions that could be in. Walnut Hills, ECC champ once again. You could have Elder as well. I would have definitely considered Elder had they beaten Moeller.
Oh, yeah. You have to, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. But I think from the way the scheduling and especially the results worked out, I think the Beavers remain at number 10.
Yeah, Lakota East is another one. They're still only a 2-loss team. Yeah, I think those last 3 are really kind of a toss-up. I think just for me personally, Beaver Creek, I think, has had a bit of a better season against better competition, going 5 with Moeller. That's impressive stuff. Going 5 with X, too. So they're one of the only teams that have taken both of those teams to 5. And then, I think just for me, Jerome has the more recent head-to-head win over Berlin, but they did split in the regular season, and the win was in 5. So, it's interesting for sure. I would say those 8, 9, and 10 spot are all really a toss-up, but we're starting to see, I think, our final top 10 being formulated here. But like you said, a lot of honorable mentions, a lot of really great teams that if some things happen, maybe could crack in, but kind of running out of time, I think, to build that resume. Looking at D2, why don't you explain your rankings to me first here?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't caught up that much between what happened between Roger Bacon and Carroll, but I still think Carroll overall this season has been a much more solid team than Roger Bacon, especially from their contests outside of GCL code, where Carroll's able to be contesting against Moeller, granted a more healthier Moeller than what we've been seeing recently. I think the biggest thing in my rankings is it just comes down to, again, you talked about how McNick was able to take 2 victories off Baden, but I think Baden has just done a better job more consistently. I think especially at home, getting a victory against Fenwick, getting a victory against Carroll. Granted, both of those are in 5, but in the end, both of those are victories. And that's why I still keep that trifecta going between Fenwick, Carroll, and Baden overall in my rankings. Looking down, again, McNick goes from 10 to 8 just off that victory itself. But I think for McNick, they have hope to pull some upsets in the tournament, but I think they're still in that spot behind St. Charles. And can they really be a danger?
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough D2 squad. I think, that 3 to 8 spot, you could put anywhere, anybody, anywhere, and really can be able to justify it. Like I had in my seedings, I had Carroll at 2, Roger Bacon below them, but in my rankings, I have Roger Bacon above Carroll. I think that again turns to more of a prediction of what coaches will do versus what I personally think. I think that Roger Bacon is the more talented team. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, you have McNicholas below Baden, but like you said, Baden also has the wins over Fenwick and Carroll, and then Fenwick and Carroll also have wins over Baden. So yeah, it's just really tough to give a definitive ranking. These teams have just been so competitive with each other all year. Now, how about the 1 and 2 spot? I would say, based on what we've seen from a healthy DeSales team, again, getting the win over St. Vincent St. Mary, the only really blemish we had from DeSales was a loss to St. Charles. And granted, it was a bad loss, but I think for me, going into the GCL Challenge and being able to go 3-0 against quality D2 teams, was it McNick and Carroll, and then also Alter, who isn't on the top 10, but it's probably near it. I don't know. I think that warrants them to maintain the 1 spot, and they did all that without their setter too.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I take them from 3 to 2. I think St. Vincent St. Mary's just takes number 1 overall. Again, this is more of a legacy thing this entire season where the Irish have definitely looked more consistent. DeSales does have the head-to-head victory, but like I said, it just seems like Logan Jennings' side knows what they're doing. They're put together, and it just feels like they're at a number 1 spot right now. Can DeSales get better? Can they take it back? Most definitely. But I think it's just the start of where DeSales could grow in this era right now where they don't have Cam Hoying. Let's see how long he's out. I think the moment he comes back, I think DeSales is back in the 1 spot, to be honest with you. But for right now, I think in terms of more complete teams, St. Vincent St. Mary's has it.
So for our ranked match of the week, what do we got?
Yeah, we got some interesting ones. We talked about it before. Liberty versus Derby, number 3 versus number 5. And Derby is really going to be a menace in this type of game. Will they get it done, though? I don't think so. Give me Liberty to win that 1 and 5, but it will be a rather
it's best of 3. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, because it's best of 3. Liberty wins it in 3, but that's going to be one game where you're going to be going to extra serves, and it's going to be very interesting to see down the stretch, especially when it comes to point differential.
Yeah, I mean, Derby at home too, on their home court.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting. I think that Liberty probably has the edge here. I would say Liberty in 2, but man, is it going to be a tight match? Like it's probably going to be 25-22, 25-23, just because Derby's gotten so much better. Liberty kind of had a lull of easy competition, right? They haven't really played a real team since the Elite 8. So that was quite a while ago. And it's no fault of their own. They have to play their league teams, but they're just not very challenging for them. And I believe from watching some recent highlights, I think Ryan Severson is still not at the front row. So they're not even at full strength yet. I don't know if they will be ever for the tournament. If they get him back, though, and have 2 solid outsides, that's going to be huge. But I don't think that's going to be the case for Monday. Now, we did talk about an honorable mention. St. Vincent St. Mary and Archbishop Hoban play tomorrow. Almost put that there, but I think Liberty Derby just has to take it. But again, a good preview of what will probably be the regional final for tomorrow or today, if you're watching this when it's uploaded. How about unranked match of the week? Who we got?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one down the stretch. Elder versus Loveland. And you got 2 teams that in ways are headed in 2 different directions, where Elder's able to get some of their confidence back again, almost beat Moeller at Brisbane, and then able to back it up with a 3-set win against Lakota West. Loveland lost to Walnut Hills on their home court in 3. And I just think the way the Panthers are going right now, I think they beat the Tigers. Should be interesting on how point differential works. I'm probably thinking around at least 15 or 20. The Panthers are winning that point differential. They're definitely winning this one in 3.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think Lancer coming back is huge. And I'll be honest, I underestimated it. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but having another solid hitter alongside Fred Harvey at the outside is just huge for him. And they really gave Mueller a test and almost beat him. It was pretty dang close. So good on them. And I think this will obviously be after seedings. So a Loveland upset wouldn't really mean anything for them in terms of bracket play. But yeah, definitely an interesting one. Definitely good for Elder to hopefully build some momentum heading into the state tournament. All right. And with that, this has been Ohio VolleyTalk. I'm here. Any final thoughts?
Not really, other than the fact that although the seedings could be uploaded and the seedings per se are kind of already set from whatever OHSA does, there's a lot of really interesting matchups where once we get to those playoff matches, the seedings are going to go out the window.
Yeah, definitely. And the big thing about the playoffs, doesn't matter what you're seeded, all you got to do is get there. So I'm really interested to see not even just the numbers, but what teams go where, because there's no longer South 1 and South 2 or East 1 and East 2. It's all one region. You got to win a regional final if you want to head to the state tournament. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. But we thank you for watching, and we will catch you next week.